Hey everyone, on the upcoming episode of Noon, meet Tara, a dynamic individual weaving her way through the realm of psychiatry and into the adrenaline-fueled world of EMS. Tara, an accomplished psychiatric nurse practitioner with a rich background in mental health, currently serves at the local college. After dedicating several years to supporting mental well-being, Tara is now venturing into the captivating field of EMS, actively pursuing her EMT basic license. Beyond her professional pursuits, Tara finds strength in lifting heavy weights and staying committed to her fitness journey while incorporating it into her daily activity. This episode promises a fresh perspective on the intersection of mental health, emergency care, and the importance of physical health. Let's get started. Hey everyone, if you're looking for an amazing book to read, I have a great suggestion. Ready Left, Ready Right. It's a medical thriller written by one of my good friends and favorite new authors, D.D Finder. D.D Finder believes in supporting first responders and their mental health, so with every purchase of Ready Left, Ready Right, a portion of the proceeds goes directly to the nonprofits, Debriefing the Front Lines, 62 Romeo, and the Overwatch Collective. The book is now available on Amazon. Don't forget to listen to our podcast interview with D.D Finder, Season 2, Episode 14. You'll be able to find the link for his book and our noon interview in the description below. Awesome, Tara. Thank you so much for joining us on the 911 Nonsense podcast today. I appreciate you coming out so much. We've been talking for a couple months now. I'm really excited to have you on. Can I go ahead and get an introduction?
Sure, Sam. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and just within this year, I became a fully independent, so I no longer need doctor oversight. And obviously, since I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, I'm also an RN, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. And right now, I am a EMT basic student.
Yeah, that's we're going to talk a little bit about that later.
Yes. Absolutely. I bet I'm going to get a lot of DMs about that. Like, what? But yes.
Probably. So how long have you been in nursing altogether?
I've been in nursing for 21 years. Yes.
Wow, that's impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually went back to nursing school, though. I went to nursing school when I was 30. So I started off, my story really fast, I was a student athletic trainer, loved sports, was going to be an athletic trainer. Got into a good school for it. This was going to be my dream. And then we started clinicals with sport teams. Loved the gymnastics team. Then I was put on football. And let's appreciate the time. This is in 89, 90, where we didn't have really appreciation for, traumatic brain injuries, concussions, CTEs, all that good stuff. And this is up in the Northeast. We're not always the nicest of the nice. And I would be tasked with having to tell people, you just got hit, maybe you need to sit out for 5 minutes, all that. And that just wasn't my thing. And then it was like, well, what do I do? What do I do? And I didn't want to keep in school, because I was halfway through it. So my credits it lined up well with health education. So I graduated with a degree in health education and a minor in psychology. And there's a backstory to that I could share with you on that. But before I went on I got a master's in counseling, but I was offered a health education position and then to be an assistant track coach at Amherst high schools, where I did my teaching clinicals. And this was this is in 1992, but I just felt this calling. Yeah, it's like when we wrote in paper and pencil. But anyway, it was so long ago. God, I'm so old. But anyway, I then said, I want to go on and get my master's. Well, I wanted to be a psychologist, so I went on to University of Georgia, but I then went into a termination degree where I got a master's in counseling. And then I worked on a mobile crisis unit with police officers in DeKalb County. I was a foster care caseworker. And then I was a child adolescent master level psychologist, but a counselor. And that position out of all of them, I think really actually sadly is the one that, kind of sucked my soul dry, more so than mobile crisis. And And then I just always felt this pull to go into nursing. I don't know, DD told you, like, we're from a family of nurses. Our mother is a nurse. Um, my grandmother's a nurse. I have an aunt that's a nurse, a cousin that's a nurse. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, but I never thought I was smart enough to be a nurse. As I had some learning difficulties when I was younger, but then in college I started kick ass so much that my mother was even like, "Are you cheating?" But I was like a late bloomer,
Yeah.
I just, and also it was interesting to me. So I did really well in nursing school. And then when I got out of nursing school in 2002, I kind of hopped around, but I got pregnant and I had two sons close together, and it was just I somebody talked to me, you should go into forensic nursing. That would be fascinating. So I was trained as a sexual assault nurse examiner, and I did that, and then that parlayed into ED. But right after I finished nursing school, interesting, I wanted to be a pediatric nurse practitioner. But then I got pregnant. I had a lot of complications. I had to go on bed rest, so I dropped out of the program. But then I started thinking, I have this psych degree, but I didn't want to do 10-minute med checks. But people like, you could kind of be like a Frasier, you could do that, but just as an, you don't have to just do med checks. You could be a therapist too. And so I went back and I got my degree in '09. And then I worked for 2 years, well, a year and a half at our medical facility. At basically we have a level 1 trauma hospital. It's a teaching hospital. And I worked in that psychiatry department there in an outpatient facility. And then I knew a nurse practitioner at the time who's the director of our college here. Like, we have a college in this, well, it's a university in the city. We have the big one, the top 10, that's up in the northwest part of the state. I'm in Arkansas. That's University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. But this is University of Arkansas, Little Rock. We always say we're like the stepchild of it.
Yeah.
And she was trying to get me, in a position here. And so I started just coming twice a week. And I could tell you that backstory too. And then it grew into a position. And it's really, so I've been where I'm at now since 2011.
Wow, that's impressive. That's a very, very long time. So
Yeah, I
what,
have a great team.
yeah, that's great. So what pushed you into becoming an EMT?
Sure. I There's two things. First, from a professional level, I hate to say this, but as a psych nurse practitioner, you're useless in medical emergencies. You're just useless. And I really saw that when, I don't know if it's just fate, serendipity, bad luck. I would be, and I remember you and somebody else talking about when you would roll up on an accident, what you would do, because you're not required to do anything. I don't mean to be, but I'm the first responder. I will come up to like car wrecks, people having seizures. And I thought, also I'm getting older. I don't know if DD told you this, but there was a situation where both of us had to go up and take turns with both of our parents who both were hospitalized during COVID.
Ooh.
During that whole, yeah, it was a mess. One had COVID, the other one had a fractured hip. And I just thought, and I'm sure you could speak better because you're you lived it. DD lived it. A lot of your people lived it. Response time isn't always. Sometimes you got to know what you're doing. And I'm a nurse. I need to know what I'm doing. And I thought, I'm not getting any younger, and I'd love to learn it now. And I know it's kind of hard as a 53-year-old, but also just because now I have a different perspective. And I didn't want to lose my skills, but it's really all new skills, because even as an ER nurse, we're not first responders. It's different. It's
It
definitely
is true,
different.
and I'm glad that you're taking the initiative and understand that there's a difference between first responder and nurse, right? Because it's two different types of trauma, right? You have your on-scene trauma, so you're seeing a
Yes.
whole different ball game, and you're having to be there while people are freaking out. But then you have the continued trauma at the ER, right? Where once we turn over, we're done. It's all yours, and you
Yeah.
have to kind of pick up the pieces in the ER to figure out what's going on and then deal with the family longer term than we do.
Yeah. Yeah. But you see a lot. I mean, really, in my eyes, I think first responders are the true heroes. I'm not diminishing ER nurses, or not even just nurses, but ER crew, docs, techs. respiratory therapists, or even when you get onto the floor, whether it's ICU or med surge, or, like, I definitely don't want to diminish those roles, but you all are the true heroes, because, people have a wide range of emotion and how they act when under duress.
Sure.
And you just don't know until it happens to you, or a loved one.
That's a very accurate statement. And so what got you into the psych side to begin with?
Sure. I never really thought that I would do anything like that, but I was I've told this story a whole bunch of times, and it sounds almost like, in a way, sometimes I wonder, are you embellishing this? But no, it's pretty, it's pretty much what got me into it. I never thought of being in the psych field, but I went to college. This is when I was an athletic training major, and I had an intro to psychology book, and I was on the bus. Like, I didn't have a car, so I'd have to take a bus home from, like, the west part of the state. I went to Springfield College, back to the Boston area. And we didn't have Greyhounds. It was called the Peter Pan, that went from Springfield to the Boston area. And I sat next to, she was actually a prostitute, and she was like, we ended up sitting next to each other, and she's like, what are you reading? Psychology. And then she just started to open up to me and just tell me her whole life. And I listened to her, and we had a conversation, and she said, you're the first person, you're a really good listener, and you're the first person I've talked to, that didn't really judge me. You ought to go into this field. And then I was like, maybe she's right. And then, because I always felt this need that I wanted to help people, but I just didn't know really in what capacity. I felt I needed to work with people, but I really didn't know what my calling was. And I said, maybe it is counseling, but I saw myself more so being a psychologist. But then when I found out it was all this testing and psychometric testing, that just didn't appeal to me. So
no, I think you picked an excellent field, and I think, unfortunately, we're losing a lot of those people in your field. There's such a high demand for psych anything these days.
Yes.
Is that something that you notice a lot out in your area as well?
Yes. I'd see. The good thing is, it seems like just as many young, eager people come into it as, like, there's people leaving it. But for the most part, I think there's now a big push for self-care. And because before we'd say it, but we didn't really appreciate it. And so I think and that's one of the reasons where I work, and it's very rare, number one, at our university, and number two, really, for a site like a counseling group. 4 of us have been together for 11 years, and 5 of us have been together for more than 6 years.
That's
impressive. That's really remarkable. Yeah, it's really remarkable. And this is not to, crap on, where we work, but when you work in higher learning, people think you make a lot of money. You don't.
No.
And that's even the medical people. We don't. Like, all of us could leave and make a lot more money, but we don't, because we really enjoy the students. We enjoy we work really well together. Because, I work with counselors or social workers. And I'm a licensed professional counselor too, but I predominantly do psych evals and med management. But because of my counseling background, I'm not doing like a 5-minute med check, like, oh, Sam, so you're feeling depressed? Well, let's bump up your Prozac. Like, I go deep into it. How are you sleeping? How are you eating? What are your stressors? How are things with your roommate? Like, I go deep into it. And I love what I do. I feel it's like a privilege and a pleasure to work also with that age group, because they're out of the home, even though there's a lot of parental influence. But with child adolescent psychiatry, it was rough, because there's not, you were kind of, I hate to say it, a lot of those kids were doomed until we could get them out of the house or had a positive role model with them. And then just older people, I'm older too, but some people, it's hard to look at yourself. It's hard to do counseling. It's much easier to take a pill. It's much easier to take a pill. Yeah.
It's true.
And
unfortunately,
and unfortunately, antidepressants just don't work that fast, No. And I have to, but the young students, they want that too. Also, not to be like, they watch the TikTok and think this, but it is true. They'll come in self-diagnosed. And so I spend a lot of time talking to them, like, well, there's also pathology, and then there's normal response.
Yes.
So I do a lot of education too.
Do you feel like you get a lot of repeats back too, like that are actually listening to the things that you're sharing with them?
It's not immediate. It will be what will happen sometimes. I could tell I've really pissed somebody off, and they leave, and then they just ghost me and never come back. But then like a year later, and I make it very clear, I'm not like, see, I told you. I was like, it's so good to hear from you. It's so good to hear from you. Let's pick up where we were. Because also I know for some of them, I'm the first entrance they've had in mental health, and I don't want it to be horrible. Because like I know I've heard your conversations before, some people have had, and DD, and you spoke about this. Sometimes it's not a good fit. Some of the counselors out there, they might be really good, but they may not be a good fit for you.
Yes,
But
and that is
sadly,
something I
yes,
push really hard because
yes,
it's hard or I should say it's easy to go in and be like, well, that was a complete waste of time. That person just didn't
yep.
get me at all. And again, it comes down to jiving. And it's the same thing with a partner. Sometimes you have a
Mm-hmm.
partner that you get along really well with. And sometimes you have a partner that you just have to struggle and you have to grit your teeth the entire 12-hour shift. And it's the same thing as picking a counselor.
I really like what you said because I can relate to that as a nurse. Is even though you didn't have a partner, you had people that you worked with on the floor, and sometimes you would show up and be like, "Oh crap, this is going to be horrible." Even and then other times you're like, "Yes, this is going to be no matter what happens," because you need to be able to trust who you work with and feel like they
Yes,
have your back. So I can understand that. And especially like to go back to the counseling thing too, even though my role predominantly is med management and psych evals, I don't want their experience to be horrible. What they'll say a lot is like, wow, you spent time with me. I felt, listen, I might have gotten it wrong, but at least I want them to have the experience that I listened, that I was present, and I wasn't just like throwing pills at them, and that, what they said mattered and that they matter.
that's fantastic.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Because it's like, I feel, and this is not a nice thing to say, I feel like I clean up after a lot of crap that, especially when they've entered the mental health, they've had to seek mental health before. And just some of the stories we hear, even the other counselors too, were like, wow, there's crap out there's excellent counselors and nurse practitioners and docs out there. And there's some, not so good.
So you said that you've listened to quite a few of my episodes, and I do talk a lot about psych issues here in New
Yes.
Mexico. What is your thoughts on patients being flown from different parts of the state to go to an inpatient unit?
Your perspective was one that I was like, wow, yes, because what just happened here in Arkansas, we now have a rule. Well, it's not a rule, it's a law that if you attack a healthcare worker, you will be charged with a felony. But I've worked in the
Oh, that's
ER,
good.
and yeah, I've been threatened like all of us, right? Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna kill you, bitch, blah blah blah. Oh no, they're just having a bad day. And then just let's appreciate, and though these are my people, though I don't work in inpatient psych anymore, I have before, and it's like I was telling, I was on a mobile crisis unit, and that was like, it was all psych calls, and a big chunk of them were agitated. That would be really dangerous to fly somebody that was not, I hate to say it, but sedated, you know
It is
that
scary,
could be.
right? It's a scary
Yeah.
thought, especially when you see
Yes.
kind of some of the worst in the ER setting.
Yes. and
Um,
and I'm assuming, would they have been flown because of a medical issue,
No, so they have to be
or was
medically
it?
cleared before they can be flown
Okay.
anywhere to an inpatient, unless the inpatient psych facility can accept them with whatever medical conditions they have.
Okay. This is going to sound, forgive my ignorance. What would be wrong with ground transportation? Are they wanting to use flight just because it's faster?
It's faster, but also because our ground transport services right now are so short staffed. So a lot of our transport capability companies are used in the 911 system. So if you're going to take somebody like for flight, it's going to take us usually about an hour to transport that patient. It'll take an ambulance service almost 10 hours out of that
Oh,
service.
wow.
So
Okay.
that they lose a 911 truck if they even have the ability to utilize that truck.
Okay. And so this, Wow. And that's, I guess, an issue, like we're saying in Arkansas, even though Arkansas is a big state, we're not as big and not, and we're rural, but like you can
Mhm.
get pretty much any corner within corner to corner. Well, I'm central, but I could get to any corner within 3 hours,
Oh yeah, that's
you
pretty
know,
good. We're a little
and
bit bigger than that.
yeah. Because I
uh,
remember I drove to New Mexico and it was a long drive
it is a very long
from
drive from
Arkansas.
there. So, what do you think about telehealth services for psychiatric patients in the ER?
we I have no experience with the ER doing that, but I do now because when the pandemic hit, we started. I was like, "Oh, telemed, you can't really see them." Now I'm like, yeah, telemed, way to go. I
Yeah.
think nothing really, yeah, I like this. Nothing really takes the place of like being there and seeing them because I'm just thinking from a telemed perspective, like you and I talking. I can only see you from, chest up. I can't see if you're bouncing. I can't look at your arms and see if you cut yourself. I can't get the like your hygiene. I don't know any of that. So you will miss some of that. But I think, the more, but I also know it's short staffed and if it will expedite treatment, I'm all for it. I'm
Sure.
definitely all
I
for it.
definitely think there are places for telehealth medicine, especially
Yes.
for psychiatric telehealth medicine in the field. It just is going to have limitations, but I think any service that offers telehealth is going to be limited.
Yes. And also, in a weird way, though, I'm speaking from a provider perspective, but what may actually happen, strange enough, I guess it just depends on the issue. I mean, some people could be really psychotic and think, well, it wouldn't matter if it was face to face or telehealth, but sometimes the patient, strange enough, might be more comfortable opening up, because
In
we sometimes,
telehealth versus real life, you
yes,
mean? Or yeah. No, I
yeah,
could see that
I
for
could
sure,
see that.
especially in
Yeah.
probably our younger population, right? Who deal mostly
Yes.
with online interactions instead of person to person interactions.
Yes.
I could
Yes.
definitely
Yes.
understand that. And
Yes.
I would say that
Absolutely.
probably I'd say probably 50% of the psychiatric patients that we transport are pediatric, um,
Hmm.
being under the age of 18. So
Yes.
I could see that working out a
Wow.
little bit better. I just think we're so short with psych help here in New Mexico that it just makes a lot of things frustrating and a lot of things time consuming that necessarily wouldn't have to be if we had the services available. I know that in our state they are working to bring in more nurses and more doctors, but it's a huge like pay disparity, right? We have a huge level
Hmm.
one trauma here and we bring in a lot of brand new baby doctors and a lot of brand new
Yeah.
baby, yeah, everything. And I, I don't get paid as a doctor, so I don't know. But my feeling is, well, they need the experience, so we don't have to pay them that much.
Hmm.
But then we're not
And
doing
I
anything to
remember,
keep
yeah,
them. Yeah, we're not doing anything to keep them
exactly.
here.
They're not invested in them. Yeah. It's my very first job, and it was actually, well, most of my job was is within the teaching facility. So, we'd always be like, oh crap, July 1st, it's all new docs.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
and like you're saying, you definitely need, some senior staff. And, I get that they got to learn, but I saw it was a big difference too in because of my has only been level one, and you'd see like I don't know, I might be having it wrong because now it's been so many years. It's like what, like the third year would be at the head, and then the first year would be this, and the second year would be that, and there was a flow. But like you're saying, emergency, is just a high turnover. But there's some fields too, and same with emergency medicine. You want to have some people that have longevity there, that have institutional
Yes.
knowledge, that also, just from a patient perspective, it's like, okay, good, I know Dr. So and so will be there, be it endocrinology or neurology, but also in the ED. So yeah, I could see that. And that's, man, now I'm almost thinking I love Arkansas, but maybe I ought to move to New Mexico.
I think you'd probably be welcomed with open arms, but probably have to pay.
I don't know. We might have to talk because we're Arkansas, but that's interesting because different. I've met my husband in Atlanta, and so Atlanta's a lot more expensive, but your money does go farther in Arkansas if you're just smart. You're not paid as much, but it goes a little bit farther. Versus, say, if I was doing this up where I grew up in Massachusetts, in the Boston area, I'd have to have two or three, hustles
Is that where you
going.
grew up? I
So,
couldn't tell by the
mhm.
accent at all.
Yeah, I have a weird accent because I've been halfway. I know I have like an Arkansas accent because I've been
Arkansas.
gone. And it's funny, like in the ER, because I was always stressed, so it'd come out really strong. They'd be like, ah, yeah, Tad, the chat. And they'd like make fun of me. But the way they make fun of me, I'm like, you almost sound like you're British. You do realize I'm from New England, not England.
Right.
Like, it's not chart, it's chat. There's
Yes.
no R.
That's fantastic. I love it. So you and D.D are siblings.
Yes,
And he
yes.
told me to ask you very specifically what happened to your mother's meatloaf.
So our mother was a nurse. Now I'm older. I'm 8 years older. I have a fun DD story. Like I have a lot of fun DD stories. So usually I'd be tasked with, babysitting us, or my dad would come over and visit. And my mom, I don't know what it is. We all effing hated meatloaf, and she make meatloaf, and it was so horrible. And my father came over. He's like, "Oh God, not meatloaf again," because he'd come and hang out with us. So we walked outside. Now we lived also behind tracks, and like meatloaf. I remember once we were gonna like put it down the gutter. We were gonna put it down like the sewer, but instead we threw it behind the railroad tracks. So,
So you were
and then
taking the
and
meatloaf
then
she made and you were tossing it over the railroad tracks.
but we weren't thinking that she's like, oh, they love my meatloaf, and then she kept cooking it.
Is it just meatloaf in
and
general, or was it very specifically your mother's meatloaf?
I think it was just meatloaf. I don't know. From that, I think I have so many food issues because of my mom and food. Also, she had, bless her heart, OCD. We weren't allowed to touch the stove. And it was so we weren't even allowed to touch the stove. But she'd heat it up, and it was just certain directions, and like we weren't allowed to cook. And this was back in the 80s, and you know they didn't God, we didn't have cell phones back there.
We didn't.
They would call. No, we didn't have cell phones. You had a landline. And so I mean, God, I remember I was left alone. I was a neighborhood babysitter, Sam. I'm like 11 with taking care of like the whole neighborhood. Now I
Yep.
know that's a DHS call. That's a DHS call. So, but yeah, my mother's meatloaf. Oh, and she's like, "Oh, my just loves my meatloaf." We're like, "Oh God, not meatloaf again." Yeah, I just took it, just threw it down the tracks, and the animals could come and get it. And then once we put it down outside in the sewer, and then we had to be smart because she thought we loved it. But yeah.
That's so funny. Oh my goodness. I'd probably get the shit smacked out of me if I had done that.
Well, yeah. I'm probably leaving out a lot of that, but it was like, oh crap, we got to think about that one. Like, oh no, because yeah, she didn't. Yeah.
That's
And
so
then my dad
funny.
would come over and get us Chinese food or pizza. Then you have to get rid of the smell, in the house.
Then you have to hide it.
Yes. Just didn't really
uh,
think that one through, Sam. And so I have two sons. So, the little kids, when those kids that could write about you as a mother. And so I found what my son wrote about me as mom. And it was like, mom, she's a nurse. She works hard. And then sometimes I think, oh my God, did I do anything with you? She's always busy. I'm like, oh no, I'm a terrible mom. And then it says she got yelled at a lot as a kid.
those are all the stories you're
It's like,
sharing.
yeah, it's like, I guess it's generational trauma. She got yelled at a lot. So, this teacher's probably, oh my God, your mouth is a mess. We might want to think twice about inviting her to career day.
Yeah. I wonder if she is self-medicating.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Is that an issue that you guys have
Sometimes.
out there? Is a lot of self-medicating problems
Yes,
in your
yes, yes,
staff?
yes. With the staff or the students we see?
Oh well, we could go with both.
Yeah. Well, the staff that I see, I think we're all generally really healthy. And what the interesting thing was, I've always been like, I've always worked out and all that, and I'd always carry a jug of water with me, and people thought it was weird, and I'm like, just try it. So now we all carry water, and one of the counselors like, you got us working out, Tara. But we've like, I have barbells and bumper plates in my office, and we started doing like deadlift seminars. We call it Deadlift to De-Stress. Our director started something called Movement Monday, where you can walk with us on Mondays. So it's like, but when I worked as a nurse, I saw a lot of that. Like it was, and they knew I was a counselor, but I see, a lot, well, obviously alcohol, but then it was so sad. It seemed like the nurses I really liked, like one just had a complete utter meltdown and then popped positive for Adderall. I mean, there was a lot of, I don't want to say a lot, but when I worked there, I remember two nurses, no, one, two, three nurses getting fired. It was one for opioids, diverting opioids, another one, lorazepam, and the other one, as I said, the meltdown, like she was on Adderall. And I don't know if it was prescribed to her. And then, but just you see this, and then we would do this, and this made me think of you, and I want to ask this too, because I saw this with EMT and paramedics too. When we got off, because I worked night shift, I worked either 3P to 3A or 7 to 7. They get off and they would call it liver rounds and go drink. But at the time I had really small kids, so I went home, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, you had to go to liver rounds. But I have my own story of drinking, so yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard it called liver rounds, but that is a fairly popular thing
Yeah,
amongst a
yeah,
lot of the ER staff. And it's not the
yeah.
nurses specifically, it's kind of everybody.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Ooh, that one's interesting. We do have that a lot. But we've had I've seen a handful of nurses get fired for diverting meds.
Yeah,
And then we had a
it's really
really
sad.
really popular charge nurse who just passed away from overdosing as well,
Oh,
which is unfortunate.
yes.
And I wasn't there at the hospital at the time, but I would guess that the staff probably didn't get the de-stressing and the appropriate treatment that they needed for having lost somebody that they were so close to.
I bet oh, they need to, but you're right. It's probably like, okay, well, let's get going. Let's
Yeah,
get
because
going.
what else can they do? This you can't take. I this nurse was so well loved that for
I
them
hate
to take
that.
a day
Oh,
off, it would have taken out the whole ER. You know.
jeez. And then I want to ask if this is similar to EMTs and paramedics, because this is I don't know this, but with nurses, we're set up to basically be snitches, meaning that it is within our code and within. If I say I are both nurses and we work together, and I know you're struggling with an alcohol problem or an opioid problem, I lose my job if I don't report you. And I don't know if that's like that with paramedics and EMTs, but it was like, and then there were certain, and I get obviously if you have a coworker that's impaired, but also sometimes that could be a real gray area. What if the person's like, hey, Tara, look, I'm really struggling, and they're very functional, and they're like, hey, where do I need to go for help? I'm gonna, hey, try this place or that place or this place. But I knew a lot of nurses, like you're saying, who are self-medicating, because even though we were always at risk for having drug screens or random, but we were never given them unless there was a reason to,
Sure, and I
unless
did
there was a
recognize
reason to.
that at the hospital. It kind
Mm-hmm.
of, not to put down nurses, but it kind of adds an
Yeah.
extra layer of security when it's between EMTs and paramedics, right? Especially if somebody is
Mm-hmm.
high functioning, also because we are both responsible for driving that ambulance. We
Okay.
take turns
Mm-hmm.
driving that ambulance, you know what I mean? So if you
Yes.
have somebody who you suspect is intoxicated, whether it's on alcohol or any other type of substance,
Yeah.
we're supposed to ask, right? And if they say yes or no, then we report it from there, but then we're still supposed to report it even if they say no. Like if you, and it's that's kind of your safety, right? It's
Yeah.
okay, well, I
Yeah.
don't feel comfortable driving, and even if you take on the responsibility of driving all day, are you going to trust that person to take care of that patient, potentially that critically ill
Hmm.
patient, and I've been in a position where I've had to report for somebody who was intoxicated, and it makes you feel like shit, right? Because you are
Yeah.
narking
Yeah.
and you are telling, and it feels terrible, but you have to do it because of it's such a huge safety issue, whether you're
Sure.
driving
Sure.
or
Yeah.
not, whether you're in the ER, whether
Hmm.
you're whatever,
Yep.
and I know there's probably no way that they can prove that you knew whether that person was intoxicated or not, but still, like,
Yeah.
that's something that you have to live with on your conscience if you did know and you didn't say
Yes.
something.
Yes. I was lucky because I've never really had to confront that, where knew, there's times, be like one, kind of suspicious, but I was like, and also, I've not been in a situation where, I walked in on something, where I knew other nurses walked in on something. It's like, but it was more so because everyone, when I worked there in the ER, they knew I was a counselor, so I'd hear a lot of mess, a lot of mess within the, and it was also at a time it seemed like, and it was just like I heard everyone's like personal mess, and I kind of knew, not like, ooh, good, tea, but it's like I don't want to know that y'all are sleeping together,
Right, it's kind
two
of a
babies at
different
home. I'm like
side
sleep
for
deprived.
you. Yeah, it's kind of a different
Yeah.
side for you because, like, I've talked about this too, like being the only medical professional in my family. Everybody's like, well, I have this weird thing on my butt, like, what is that? I don't
Yes.
want to know. Go to your doctor. I am not a
Yeah.
doctor. Take that
Yes.
somewhere else. Go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's like a blessing and a curse to being medical and then a counselor too. It's like, and the party's like, no, Tara, you need a list. But sometimes I'm like, oh, I had this image of you that now it's gone. But okay, we'll work with it.
Yeah, I
We'll
can't
work with it.
unhear that.
Yeah.
That's so
but
funny.
but you did ask a really good question though, because as I said, part of it, I'm sure, as I said, like there was three nurses at the time that I worked there that were fired, and I worked with all three of them. And I remember hearing about one. I mean, one, it was sad, like, and it sounded like the charge nurse, because I really liked her. I thought that she was a great nurse, and she just took way too much Adderall that was not prescribed. And then another one tried to drag it was post, so she got fired, and then she's like, well, you worked with me, Tara, like you saw blah blah blah, and I'm like, no, I didn't. But also, no, I didn't, like, as in I didn't see what you did, but I can't come to your defense. It
Yeah.
was like sometimes they would try to drag you in. And then the third one, he was, I just, we were so busy, I just didn't recognize the signs, because I just thought he was a really anxious person, but I didn't recognize the signs that he was half the time he was anxious, and then I think just started to give himself Ativan. And then he seemed like, oh, I think he's got it together. But I didn't realize, well, that's why he got it together, because he was diverting. Because
Right.
then the way we would do it in the ER, we had a system where when you would waste controlled substances, you had to try, you say you and I was giving either 2 to 10 of morphine, and I only gave 4, and now I needed to go waste. You would come with me and you would witness me wasting it. But then sometimes you're in such a rush, it's like, okay, here's your fingerprint, like, there, Sam, I did it
Yeah.
for you. And you'd have
Yeah.
to trust them. And then you feel betrayed, like, but that's what nurse, because sometimes you're in such a rush in the ER. So it's like you're set up to, yeah, we should basically, like, not police each other, but watch each other and do that. But sometimes you then build a bond. You're like, I trust you, you trust me, and we're disposing the meds. But some people just weren't, and they could take
Right.
advantage of a level 1 trauma where you are rushing.
Right. And you brought up a good point
Yeah.
too when you talked about not recognize, like, you thought that your friend had got his shit together when he went from being very anxious to kind of mellow and was it
Yeah.
ultimately ended up using Ativan. Like, where is that line, right? Like, should I be questioning
Yeah.
you if you come in acting different one day and you seem to have it
Yes.
together? Should I be like, well, she's on drugs? You know what I mean?
Yep. Yes. Yes. Because it's like, and especially when I worked in the ER, I mean, this was way pre-COVID. This was like 2000, because I started as a SANE nurse. So 2004, I started as a SANE nurse. And then I did SANE nurse for a bit where I was just on call. And then I became an ER nurse from 2007-ish to 2009. And during that time, it was just like you were learning a new charting system and all that. And I'm trying to think of my point. Sorry, menopause. But it was like, it was what you're saying. I think it was just trying to, keep on top of everything. Oh, and this is what I was going to say. Forgive me. I knew there was a point to all that. It was not pandemic, but I was there when H1N1 hit. And it seemed like we were always short staffed. Somebody was sick. I was on orientation. I'm a new ER nurse. I don't know what I'm doing. And I show up and they're like, hey, Tara, this is all yours. Good luck. And you're just like, I can't practice safely. I'm still in orientation. Yeah. So it was.
You'll probably see that when you get out of EMT school if you move on to an ambulance. Like, it's the same thing. Like, hey, you're on orientation, but you have a license. You're good to go.
Yeah.
We'll see you later.
You're good to go.
It's the exact same thing. And I won't lie. Like, I feel like that probably increases the pressure on people to perform well, especially in positions that you aren't very familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it definitely, we weren't coddled, and it sounds like, EMTs and paramedics are not going to be coddled either. You're thrown in and ready to go.
Yeah, it's a sink or swim situation. You either do well or you don't do well, and they put you back on tomorrow. Like,
okay,
it's unfortunate.
Just do better tomorrow.
Exactly, be better. Yeah, that's exactly how it's taken, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
That makes it rough for a lot of people, especially when you come into dealing with really traumatic stuff, right? Because I feel like there's no real education on how to handle trauma like that. And maybe eventually I'll get it together and get a class put on for trauma. But for now, like, what do you suggest in your clinical profession? How do you suggest people deal? What's the first thing they should do when they have a traumatic event like that?
I think first of all, let's appreciate that everyone responds differently. So I hate to say this, but not one size fits all. I think it's more important about the what not to do. And, I get like maybe getting a drink to like decompress, but if you already, are kind of creeping up, well, that could be an issue. That might not be the best thing. And I know DD talked about that too. I think it would be, for some people, they do need to talk about it, but there's a saying in our field, the more you fire, the more you wire. And some people can get stuck. I think it should be offered like, hey, you've had a traumatic call. And I know I've heard you talk about this too. Do you need, and this would be ideal, but do you need a little bit of time, even if you just debrief for like 2 hours? But I know it's not ideal. But I think, and you have to shove it down and keep going. But I wish there was a way that, I wish I knew more about this, but maybe some people like to utilize apps. There could be certain apps, maybe like and I don't mean to be all foo-foo, like, ooh, meditation, but maybe something where I did this in the ER, and this is what, I'm not saying it will work for everyone. When I'd see something really fucked up, like, oh my God, I cannot unsee that. And people would go on smoke breaks, but I didn't smoke. But it was funny. People go on smoke breaks, but if you didn't smoke, you couldn't go on smoke breaks.
You didn't get that extra break, right?
Yeah. But what I would do sometimes is just literally go outside just for like 2 minutes, because you saw a totally different environment. I knew if I could just get through this, no matter what shit has come my way, I will see this in like 8 hours, 7 hours, 6 hours. So I wonder if there's like a way to just change the scenery. Your trauma is still following you, but sometimes just it can maybe help unstuck you in the moment. So I'm saying this. So say if it's in first responder, and I wish there was a way that they could go off call for a bit and just do something. But say if they couldn't, even if there was a way that they could scramble like almost their brain where it's like going from trauma to trauma to trauma, where okay, like can we just go off for 20 minutes and just debrief, even if it's just talking to your partner or something. But some people, they don't want to do that now. They just got to shut down and keep going, going, going. So, and eventually it will catch up to you. It will catch up to you maybe 3 months from now, a year from now. You'll be, in the grocery store trying to figure out which, Greek yogurt to get. And then sometimes you just start to cry,
Yes.
That's how, sometimes it happens with some people. So I don't mean to sound loosey-goosey and all, oh, I don't know, Sam. I think it just depends on the person, but I think there are a few tenets, and that it's that it's going to be about self-care, just doing your best to sleep well. And it's okay and normal after seeing something traumatic not to be able to sleep well, for a bit. But I wish employers would do a better job of taking care of their people. But so that's why it seems like the first responder community is pretty tight, because they have to look out for each other.
Right. And as hard as we try, some people just slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
And that goes in for any type of medical professionals, not just in EMS, but also in the hospital,
I do want to say one thing. Exercise helps. I think I'm a big, but like D.D said best, exercise, you can't exercise a bad call away. But I think movement and, movement helps, some type of movement.
Sure. And it kind of sounds like you're suggesting maybe having a good healthy style before even coming into this position, yes, or while you have, yes, it, maybe maintaining a good healthy a healthier body choice. But that also goes into I for me, emotional intelligence too, right? Like maybe if you, yes, can meditate and you have the ability to meditate, try it after you see something that's really fucked up, or try it that, yeah, night when you get home from shift, or that weekend when you're off for a couple of days, take a couple of mental health days.
Yes. And just talk to somebody that gets you, like, for example, as nurses, we just first responders, somebody you can, talk to that might get your dark humor, or just that you somebody that you trust that gets what you do. Because like you're saying, like not all of our family gets it. And, right, you don't want to be, they don't get it. Or, and some people, they'll just say things you're like, oh God, I should never have taught you because you made me feel worse.
So is your husband in the medical field or not?
Yes. He is a forensic psychiatrist. So people,
oh my goodness.
Whoa. They're like, you're like, what is it like at your house? Do you just analyze everyone? I go, but you can't. You can't. You have to, see people as they are. And we do our best not to pathologize people. But every now and then they're like, oh, yeah, it sounds like they have antisocial personality disorder. Yeah, they say.
Yeah. So do you guys watch a lot of true crime shows?
No, he's a huge sports fan. I like some. I definitely like some, but he's more into like sports. I think that's his way to decompress.
Sure. No, but that, yeah, makes sense. I mean, I don't take, yeah, a day off and watch a medical show all day. So
yeah. Well, the ones that were like, they'd make me angry. Like when I used to watch ER, and I had to stop because like everyone was gorgeous. And I'm sorry, when you got shot, or like we had to open up your ribs, you're not, your hair isn't perfect, and you're pale. You don't look pretty.
Yeah, you look more like the dummy that I had to work on earlier than. That's funny.
And it was just kind of like that. But yeah, so he's in the field, and he was just one of those. I was like, why are you doing this class? Like, I said, because we're getting older. You fall off a ladder, and I need to know how to stabilize your spine.
Right. Sometimes it's just good for the knowledge too. I think honestly, if it was up to me, I would put everybody in high school through an EMT basic class.
Yes, because it's just, even some of it you wouldn't think to do, but it's so simple, like shock, like cover them up,
put a blanket on them. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's certain things you just wouldn't think to do, or just how to stabilize somebody's neck. Like I even told my husband, I go, if I just like throw up my hands, because what I do is I work and then I like rush from work to the EMT class. So it's like nonstop. And then on the days I'm not in the EMT class, I'm reading to absorb it. I said, even if I just was like, I can't do this anymore, which I'm going to see it to the end, I have learned so much, because also this is now 2023, because even the stuff that I thought I might have known has changed, like
Like,
stroke protocol.
yeah, and don't put things in people's mouth who are having seizures.
Yes.
Like, so many
Yes.
people do that. You want to know what one of my
Yes.
favorite ones is?
Ooh, what,
This
what?
is, I'm going to tell you a secret.
Ooh,
This
good,
is
good. I
one
like
of my
secrets. I got my
this
tea.
is one of my favorite, like, it's not really a good call to roll up on, but it's one of my favorite things is when you roll up on an overdose, like a heroin overdose, and they
Yeah.
have frozen green chili in their pants, or ice pops, or ice cream, or ice, or
Yeah.
they're drenched in water because their friends stressed out so hard that they just soaked them with water. Basically, waterlogged them because they can't move. And then we get there and we wake them up with Narcan, and they're like, "Why is there ice in my pants?" You know?
That is wild. See, this is good stuff to know. So when I see that, I will know, okay, well, somebody at least tried to save you.
Yeah, yeah. You have ice pops in your pants because somebody loves you.
Somebody loves you.
Yes.
But now we have Narcan everywhere. Like we have it on our campus. We had, when my kids were in their high school, there was two overdoses, and a girl had Narcan on her, and the student, like the fire department came or something like that, and the girl was like, oh, I have Narcan. Like it was just, I don't know the whole story. It was even on the news. I might be saying it wrong, but it's, where when I was in the ER, we saw a lot of overdose, but and this is going to sound not popular, nobody really cared because it wasn't in the suburbs yet. We saw a
Yeah.
lot, a lot of oxy, a lot of hydro, and then heroin started kind of creeping in, but not too much. And then from Massachusetts, like then there was a whole, and I'm sure in other states too, but also the Massachusetts, there was a huge heroin problem like about 10 years ago because it was hard to get pills, but nobody really cared. And like Narcan was like, nobody could get a hold of Narcan now. Like, I mean, it's all over the place. I mean,
Yeah,
which is great,
they
but it's sad
promote
nobody
it.
cared before.
I
Mm-hmm.
know, and they promote it really hard. Like you can basically
Mm-hmm.
get Narcan almost anywhere now, and all of our
Yeah.
police officers carry Narcan.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
They can
wow.
do intranasal Narcan, and then yeah, the fire
Okay.
department carries Narcan, and then our EMS crews carry Narcan as well. So, are you guys seeing a huge fentanyl issue out there as well?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's also because supposedly we're like a line, like from where we're located, Arkansas, like to come up Mexico, Texas, Arkansas, like up to the northern states. And there's been some busts, but fentanyl we're seeing. In fact, yeah, it's sad, but I have a niece by marriage who died of a fentanyl overdose in December. So yeah, it's kind of hit home too, but we're definitely seeing it here too. It doesn't seem as prevalent as other states, but we have fentanyl. We have, well, more so hydro and oxy overdose, but fentanyl's making its way here. And as I said, just in December,
Yeah,
yeah.
fentanyl's terrible down here. We're having high
Oh, I bet.
schoolers.
Jeez.
Lots of our high schools, lots of our colleges. We're seeing a lot of overdosing. It's a huge issue down here in
Wow.
my home area of Las Cruces. It's a huge issue, like
Hmm.
really big down there as well, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, yeah.
They're saying that, and this is just from what I've read and kind of what I've seen. I don't have any experience on it or anything, but they're saying that fentanyl is worse than heroin because with heroin, at least your withdrawals are a little bit longer. And with fentanyl, because the half life is so short that you go into withdrawals almost as soon as you wake up from your high.
Wow. So
Yeah.
it's very hard to be like, okay, you know what? I don't want to use this anymore. Wow. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. So,
Is my niece lives in a small community in Arkansas, so I know it's not just an inner, or she did. It's not just an inner city problem. It's spread definitely into the rural areas too. Mm,
yeah,
mm, mm, mm.
yeah, no, it's fentanyl is a terrible drug.
Yeah,
And it's being cut with so many things that it's just mixing with
yeah.
everything. It's so much worse. So we talked a little bit about de-stressing earlier. How do you de-stress from your calls?
What I do, I mean, it's because I work out. It's like, but and I think it's to the point though, I get very irritable if I can't work out. It was like my EMT instructor, when he's like, "What do you do for her job?" And I explain to him what I do, and I pretty much sit. I go, I'm a life coach that prescribes meds, but I sit and I'm listening to people and students and all that, all the way up until I come to class. And then he goes, "What do you do to not get depressed?" I said, "Well, I'm not really prone to depression. I am prone to a lot of irritability, though. I get anxious and irritable as opposed to depressed. Like I'll see sad things and I feel sad, and I can be down for like a day or two. But I think for me, it's more the anxiety of I've dealt with anxiety before, and also like irritability, and that just might be because I'm in menopause. Um, so what I
One
do
or
for
the
me,
other.
yeah, that could be one of the, it could be both. Maybe I'm just an asshole. I don't know.
Well, I haven't seen that side of you yet. So,
Oh, thank you. I try really hard to mask that. But to answer your question in all seriousness, I think I take my job very seriously, but I try to be lighthearted. I try not to take myself too seriously. And this is probably like a burden for me. I internalize a lot. Like I'm very maybe hyper aware of like word vomiting and emotionally vomiting on people. So the way I get it out is from powerlifting and running. That's what I do. And then at night, like I have a routine, I'll stretch and then I'll just like binge Netflix or something like that. And that's how I fall asleep because I can't just fall asleep. I have to watch something to fall asleep.
so as a psychiatrist, what do you binge on Netflix?
Okay. I like horror. I, I like I like a lot. I like horror. I'm trying to think. I just watched Sly with Sly Stallone. And he said something, even though that's not horror, but he said something that really hit me. Have you seen it yet on Netflix?
I have
Sly?
not. I have not.
Okay. What in part maybe a generational thing because I was 7 when Rocky came out, but I was a teenager when all the Rockies came out and then
Mhm.
Rambo. But he said something about when you get to be 40 and then over, it's almost like a train, like your life goes whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And it's like you're on a train. And I got a visceral response from that because I really could identify with that. Because now, my youngest is in New Mexico. So major life change, the kids are out. I'm noticing now as a woman in my 50s and now talking to other women too. So almost like when you hit in your 40s and whether you choose to have babies or not, but if you no longer can have babies, it's almost like the medical community is like, just go away. Just go. We don't want to hear from you,
Yeah.
and we're trying to work, we're trying to function, but we got brain fog. I'm sitting there, I think I'm pretty smart. And then I'm in, the grocery store. I'm like, what the hell was I supposed to get? Then I'm getting irritable and about ready to cry because I'm thinking of some past trauma from like 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And I'm trying to figure out what yogurt to get. You just go through all this stuff. But what has helped me besides just trying to modulate like my attitude, but I think what helps really is exercise. It really does. DD has encouraged me to go back to writing. I used to journal, but I haven't in so long because part of it is because I have to write so much for my job or I have to type so much, like so much charting. I'm just like done, you
Yeah.
know but for me it's definitely movement, and then from powerlifting, and then from like my little Instagram, I have like a little community where we check on each other. We're all master lifters, we all have jobs, we all have lives, but we check on each other, and that's kind of fun because I can kind of check out of being a mental health professional. I could check out of like the heaviness of what I do and just be like a gym bro you know
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's how I decompress. Yeah. It keeps me off of alcohol, keeps me off of drugs. So yeah.
Oh no, that's fantastic. Do you feel comfortable sharing some of the things that you've had to decompress from, like some of the harder things?
Yes, I can tell you good stuff.
Perfect.
Hmm.
Yeah. So in your career, right? Because you've had an extensive career, you've done a lot, especially some of the harder stuff. Like I wouldn't want to do your job, and it's not because I wouldn't want to be there, but I have the utmost respect for what you're doing because I couldn't
Thank
handle
you.
that myself. Yeah. If you feel comfortable sharing, we'd like to hear.
Yeah, sure. Sure. I think one, and I actually was talking to DD about this. I think I almost didn't stay in nursing. Like I had two pivotal issues where I almost didn't stay. It was first as a new nurse, a brand new nurse, and then the second one as a nurse practitioner a year out. Well, the first one as a brand new nurse, it was like, the teaching hospital. We have new residents. And I remember I had like a young teen, and he came in. He was like my very first patient, like pretty much right off of orientation. He had stomach pain. I'm a new nurse, but I know something's wrong. Like my gut is telling me there's something wrong. And they're just minimized. Well, you could give him time. That's not hurt. Nothing is touching him. I'm like, something's wrong. The doctors were getting pissed at me. And they're like, you're overreacting, you're feeding into him, all that. And I'm like, but there's something I just know is off. I know is off. What happened to that young man was then he ended up, and he was only like 14 or 15, saying he had a rare form of cancer and it metastasized. And right before then, when they brought him to the ICU and they're about ready to, put him under, and they had to actually open up his visceral organs and let it decompress, but he still passed away. He said that nurse, the one that talked funny, I can't remember her name, but can I see her? And so they let me know. But by the time I knew that and came, he was under and then he passed. And it was really sad because then his family situation was, I think mom died or was in prison. It was the same. Parents weren't in the picture. So he was being raised by an extended family and he was just kind of passed along. And that really messed with me because I felt like, I, you know, was there something more we could have done? Like I felt very helpless. And then just from the psychological component of what he went through his whole life with the family dynamics of one parent. I think one parent died and another one was in prison. Like I was like, I don't think I can do this. But then it's like, nope, get back to work, and get back to work. And so I just shoved it down. I tried to run it away. And then over time it became a little less. And then but then you have good days too. And then I learned, for me, I compartmentalize and I like put it in a box and I try to move it from my forehead, and I try to move it into the back, and that's what I try to do. But I also try not to forget it, as in, oh, I don't want to think of bad things, but I think that makes you human. And also it's like when you have a gut feeling, listen to it. Because now sometimes it's like, oh, maybe I'm over it. Maybe I'm overthinking this. Something. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I wasn't. Sometimes maybe I'm not. Maybe because I didn't know what was. I didn't know. I didn't have experience. I just knew. No, this isn't like a little. No, I don't think he's drugged. No, I don't think that's it. Then the second one, that was a really rough one, and then I have some fun ones for you, was I was a nurse practitioner now for about a year. And this is also about coping, about like, well, why do you do what you do? And like, and basically stay away from alcohol. That, I mean, every now and then, like my husband and I just had a 25th wedding anniversary, went down to New Orleans, I drank. So it wasn't like I never drink, but I'll get to the story so I can, sorry, tell you how it all ties in. So, and this is very interesting, and this also taught me about human value even within the medical community. So when I worked at this department of this clinic, I dealt with two suicides. One was an overdose, and it was a nurse that lost her license, and that was really sad to me. But the coroner called because they found my pills. But the sad thing was she was always pushing for benzos. And I'm like, I'm not giving you benzos. We're just going to deal with the top. But I would sit and listen, try to, like, she was in a shitty relationship, try to encourage her. the best I could, because as counselors, I can't say you need to leave him, but like, are you safe? What, I try my best. But
Sure.
that was really sad because she was like around my age, and that was really sad to me. But it was like, oh, well, she was a druggie. Yeah. But she had value. She had
Yeah.
value. Stop. Stop. And then another one that happened, it was right when I turned 40. And so it was a young man. The backstory with him is that he attempted suicide by a firearm, and it was intercepted. He was hospitalized, discharged. What you were supposed to be as a nurse practitioner when I first started is basically you're supposed to see the stable ones. You're supposed to, at the time we were considered extenders for the docs. But what ended up happening, I would be given really hard, difficult cases that the psychiatrist didn't want to deal with, you know.
Mm.
But this one, they felt he was a good fit for me. And we worked well together, ended up changing his meds, blah, blah, blah. So I saw him a month before he died, and he was doing great. He couldn't wait to like leave, blah, blah. He had all these plans. And then what happened was I came to work. It was around my 40th birthday, and I was brought into a room, and I was told that he died by suicide, and that my pills were found. And I remember even when I prescribed, it was nothing controlled. It was an antidepressant, were found at his side, and I was going to have to be brought in front of a board. Now the therapist got to go home and decompress because, but not me. And so I went in front of a board, and they pulled up my records. And I remember I saw him a month ago, and he was like denied suicidal ideation. He had plans for the future. He was looking forward to graduating. But one thing I knew about him is that he would sometimes, if I remember, I think he would sometimes gamble. And I said something abruptly happened. And then all that came out, something abruptly happened. And he was, like a lot of suicide attempts, he was under the influence. And that's how he passed. But that was for me. Then what happened was I went in front of the board, and this is the same. When I say a board, they had to say, and the docs were even saying Tara did nothing wrong. This is what happens in our field. People die by suicide.
Yeah.
But because I was nurse practitioners were new at that time, and there was still a lot of
Yes.
and with the higher ups, I was told that I was practicing outside my scope of practice. Sam, I lost my shit. I was like, how the fuck, pardon me for, how the fuck can I be practicing outside my scope of practice? You all train me. I am a psych mental health nurse practitioner. This is like, if I was, that would be like me, if you threw me in the cardiology lab and I gave somebody, take your pick, or if I was on call, but this is what you trained me to do. And they were like, again, this was never reported to the state board. It was all internal. And they said, well, what we're going to do is you need more supervision. So you're not allowed to start medication. You have to, you are going to function as a nurse. You can increase and decrease, but you have to run it by a doc if you are going to change medication. Once again, they got to see Tara I have an inner child named Taquisha. And so Taquisha came out. Taquisha was with me in the ER. Taquisha, if I ride in the ambulance, Taquisha comes out in times when Tara shuts down. Right? Taquisha came out, and I was like, excuse me? I was like, let me get this clear. You all train me. You're now saying that I'm outside my scope of practice while train me. There was another suicide, not an issue, but this is an issue but I lost it. I'm surprised the cops weren't called on me. And when I say I lost it, I wasn't screaming, yelling, cursing at anyone, but the situation. I was like, this is bullshit. It was more the emotional, like there was nothing I could have done. There was nothing. It was like a month after I saw him. I did everything by the book right.
Yeah, no, they totally scapegoated you to save themselves. Yeah. And that's unfortunate. Yeah. And we see that so much. We see that so much in our practices, and they tell you, well, we're not doing this, to punish you.
Yeah,
but you are. You are. Yeah. Yeah.
It was, you're really good, but we're not, I heard this, you're really good, but we're not punishing, but and how come now I need more experience? But 3 to 4 months ago, with like the really high acuity patients you gave me, that was no problem. But this one was a problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm so
So that
sorry that you
was,
had to deal with that. That's so unfortunate. In the first story you talked about, you had discussed the little kid, the 14 or 15-year-old with
yes.
abdominal pain, and I wasn't there, so I can only give you my opinion. And my opinion is
Yeah.
that you did everything that you could. You were fighting for that patient because you knew something was wrong, and ultimately it sounded like he ended up in the place that he needed to be, which was the ICU, and not discharged home and died at home, where it may or may have not gone unnoticed. You know what I mean?
Well,
So
thank you. That's a different perspective, and that actually, yeah,
yeah, no, you
yeah.
did what you thought was right for that patient, and that's all we ask for people. Don't forget to fight for yourself, and don't forget to fight for your patient, and that's what you did.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that was a heavy one. And then the one I just spoke to you about. So I came home and I was so upset by it. I just kept drinking and drinking and drinking. And I passed out. I threw up. I passed out, and my boys were young. And my husband he was so wonderful. Like, I think I wrote, and he laughs at. He goes, "I don't remember you doing it." Like, I wrote a note, like, "I'm a piece of shit. I understand if you want to leave me. I'm a horrible mom. I'm a horrible this. I'm a horrible that." I think I'm gonna cry now. Like, it was just, and wow, I think I'm gonna cry. And so and my husband, he was like so wonderful, kind of like he kept the boys away from me, and he's like, "Yeah, Tara, I can't remember what he said, but it was helpful. But that from that, I said, I don't want my boys growing up and ever seeing me do that again. And so I rarely, from that point on, like every now and then I'll drink, but never like that again. You
No,
know,
you
like
realized
they
it, and
even,
that's what's important.
yeah. Because I was like, I'm not, as I said, I am not having my boys be raised like that. Because sometimes I do worry, like because there's always collateral damage in our field, right? Because I know
Yes.
you've talked a lot, like about, your wife's not in the field, but you're in this field, and sometimes, like, I wonder, like, because I spend so much time talking to people and their problems, that I'm not present with my kids, because sometimes I'm just kind of done, you know and so I've had to really work on that. And I remember when my boys were younger, one of my kids would only come to me at night. That's the only time he would. Part of it's because he didn't want to go to sleep, but like that's when he wanted to talk. But Sam, I was just done. But I
Yeah.
wish I could have that time back. And that's what I mean by that Sylvester Stallone. Just like, I wish, because I want to be there for my family. And sometimes I think I'm good at what I do. I'm passionate about what I do, but I also realize that I have to take care of myself, so I'm there for my family.
Right. And that's another big thing that we've talked about before too, is you need to we give so much of ourselves to our job, so much of ourselves to our
Yeah.
job, and we'll get satisfaction from our job, but then we come home and we're so, like you've said, we're so just done, and we're so tired. And in the last couple of years, there I went through a really bad phase where I was like that. I came home, I didn't talk, I didn't say anything, I ate and I went to bed because I didn't have that patience. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the capacity to handle being passionate to my wife also. You know what I mean? And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's why I
Yes.
chose somebody out of EMS, because I wanted somebody that I could talk to and that didn't see the things that I saw. So I try to tell that to new people too. Like, yes, it's your job, but you need to have a line, right? There needs to be a line on your
Yeah.
days off. Spend that time with your family. Don't be answering the call. Don't be doing all of those things. Take that time, be present.
Yes. Because I think also what really woke me up too, we had an ER nurse. Oh, she was so smart. I believe she was a paramedic, became a nurse. Everyone loved her. She was the one through our Christmas parties, loved, loved, loved her. I don't want to say she let her health go, but she wouldn't really, like, she had heart issues. I remember, I think she had AFib or something that escalates to point, and she would never really eat well. She would never take care of herself. She would work so much, so much overtime. And then what happened was during her, she went for an ablation, but through a clot and had a massive stroke. And then everyone was so sad, did a GoFundMe, and then I'd go and visit her, and then everyone just kind of stopped and everyone went on. And it was so sad to me. It was really sad to me, because it was almost like she gave literally her life. And then she ended up passing away. I think it was last year. And but I just saw, like, I mean, she was just so amazing, and she was so loved, and everyone loved her. But then when she had a stroke, then everyone started to just, fade away. And but also, it was sad to me that in a way the job killed her,
Yeah.
because she would never take time off to take care of herself. And that really spoke volumes to me too, where you got to take care of yourself, Tara. And also you've got to be present for the people that matter to you.
But what does that say about the company too, who let her keep doing that?
Yep. Yep.
And we're all adults, right? We're all chasing that money because we all have things to pay for, but there still needs to be that interjection, like, hey, you've picked up 2 overtime shifts already this week, like,
yeah,
and we could do without, like, you for one night, yeah, take a break, go do something you want to do.
Yes. I don't know what the schedule's like, now, but when I was an ER nurse, I would work weekend option. That's pretty much all I can handle, because I had little kids, and then I went back to to get my graduate degree. But a very typical schedule was, you'd work 8 and then you'd have 2 weeks off. Like, I'm like, oh my God, like, how can we be somewhat competent after, day 3 of 12-hour shifts? That's scary.
That's a long shift. And most of the shifts I see out here are usually 3 in a row and a couple of days off. So it's a lot.
There was a few that did that.
Yeah, that's nuts. I do 5 in a row with my schedule, and even sometimes that I'm like, oh, I'm so ready to be done.
Ooh. And are we talking 5 12 hours?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
But then I get 5 days off.
Okay. So I could see it's like the 5, because you're doing flights now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So, but like, wow. Yeah. Cause that's just, and now, I'm in a position where I basically, people go, are you on call? I say no, but technically yes. Like, when the pandemic hit, I had Google Voice, and OMG, it was like constant calls, constant texting. And then that's how I set limits, stopped it, because I'm on our email server. The students can reach me. This is what I just do. I go, you need me, because I'm my own nurse. I am my own nurse in my own schedule. I'm like, you need me, check in. So I respond to emails and I check emails, within 24 hours. And, at times we're not on call, but if there's an emergency, we try to handle it, because the last thing I want to do is have somebody go to the ER if they really don't need to go to the ER. But we, give them the 988 suicide hotline, work with them. But I also learned I had to set boundaries. So it would be like 24 hours, even though in a way it's like, well, Tara, you work in higher learning, you should have a cush job, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and mine's actually 4 days. But since you take on a certain responsibility as a prescriber, you're kind of always, even though I'm not on the clock. I mean, I can't, if somebody contacts me, like, Saturday, having side effects, people like, oh, well, screw it, I'm not going to handle it until Monday. Need to handle it. I need to handle it.
That's tough. You are working quite a lot, lady. It's good that you have an outlet.
That's what helps. Yeah. And just, I've had to learn, and I'm still working on it, with boundaries, and I have good boundaries in the sense with patients, but boundaries where, okay, like, what would happen? Sam, I wish I could tell you I'm embellishing, but it's not. Every single powerlifting meet I've been to, except the last one, thank you, a student or a patient has gone into crisis, and I'm like, I'm trying to lift heavy here. I'm trying to live I'm trying to lift heavy. And so I had to learn. I had to like shut off my phone, and I always send like a vacation reminder that I'm not available for this time, but it will kind of mess with my head. you know? And so I had to learn, don't look.
Yeah,
It can
boundaries
wait.
are a huge
Yeah.
issue right now,
Yeah.
especially in the job where I work, where like we have uh small companies, right? So when you have a small company, you have a higher expectation because you are supposed to keep that cog rolling,
Mm.
right? Like
Yeah.
you have to keep that whole thing rolling. And I think sometimes those boundaries can get crossed. And I feel like not just for this job, but for any job, if you let people cross those boundaries once, you're more likely to do it again. And it makes it hard
Yes.
to put your foot down on that.
Yes. Yes, because and then also you may repeat to yourself, "Oh, I'm being mean. I'm not being a team player," and you basically gaslight yourself.
Yeah.
You start to gaslight yourself.
Or our companies do it for us, right? That was a
Oh
huge
yes.
thing
Oh
in
yeah.
COVID. In COVID, right? The ERs, they were like, you're not being a team player, you're letting your fellow employees down because you're not showing up to work today because you feel like poop or whatever. And then when you're not there or whoever didn't show up, your supervisors are telling the whole team like, well, this person called off, now you guys are going to have double the assignments all night.
Mm, 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 mm,
Just
mm.
from the stories that I've heard. I can't say that that happened to me, but it
Yeah.
that was a terrible time during COVID, and I just feel like the medical staff and the medical side just hasn't caught up with staffing.
Yeah. Hmm.
Not to say that it was full
But
staffed before, but it definitely decreased significantly during COVID.
and then they didn't make it much better by, the mass exodus of seasoned nurses. And then so you had, other nurses that were, sticking there for whatever reason, but then they would bring in travel nurses that will work right next to these nurses that have been, loyal employees and all that, but making 2 to 3 times the amount that they were.
Yeah.
It was just
Yeah.
all that kind of dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah. And then bringing in more and more and more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Where they're like, well, wait a minute, well, 6 months ago you said there's no way none of us will get raises, and I'm next to a nurse, I'm only making 40 or 50 and they're making 90. you
Yeah.
know yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
rough. So we've
Yeah.
talked a little bit about the bad stuff. How about some of the good stuff?
Okay, I have a funny story for you. I could give you a good story and a funny story.
Let's do it.
I think, okay, so I think the good story in this, I think just kind of reiterated, keep doing this work, was I work with nursing students too. And then, when the pandemic hit, because I'm in the university, a lot of our nurses, they would enter the workforce, but then go on and get their bachelor's, and they would still see me. And one I remember is just like, just young, so full of life and love people. Then she got thrown into COVID as a nurse, and then, it did a number on her. And she told me she went to another counselor because she had insurance. So she went to another counselor, and she told that counselor, she's like, I feel, I don't see what the purpose is. And she started to have, suicidal ideation. That counselor told her, oh, you're just having a bad day. And she contacted me immediately and she said, Tara, I know you're not seeing me anymore, but can I see you? I'll go, of course, of course. And so we met, and she's like, Tara, I knew at the very least when I told this person I was thinking of jumping off the Arkansas bridge, well, it was basically a bridge into the Arkansas River, that you would at least have a plan for me, and we could game plan on how not to do that. And that's when I realized, okay, I need to keep doing what I'm doing, because many times I almost wonder, am I helping anyone? Like sometimes you wonder that, because
Yeah.
really our meds do work, but they don't always work.
Yes.
And talk therapy can do so much, but it doesn't always work. And sometimes I wonder, am I really helping? Am I really helping? And then I realize, okay, no, I need to keep doing this. And not to sound like gay, but then we met, And then, we got her through it, and she got better. And that, because that would have been a tragic loss to the nurses. Also, she was, to her family and to her. So that one, it was a good story. And then another one as an ER nurse. And you don't think, you're told talk to the patients, even if they're not responsive. And I talk. I can't, things I can't shut up. So I'm like, have, a critically ill patient, and I'm just chattering away to that person. I'm like, I got you. This is what I'm doing. I'm talking, and people like, he's not responsive. And he kind of was. He was in and out of it. And then he was transferred to another department. Never knew what happened. I just remember it was an MVC. It was a pretty significant mechanism of injury, and he was. I didn't know what happened to him. So I'm in that hospital. I'm with my kids. I got one here, and what I'm doing, I'm in the process of leaving that job, but starting grad school for a nurse practitioner job. And I'm talking to my older son, and he recognized my voice. And he said, hey, ma'am, excuse me, ma'am. And I turned around and I was like, yeah. He goes, do you remember me? He's like, did you work in the ER? And he named around the date. And I said, yes. And it was like 2 years before, and he was coming back to get his medical records. And he said, you took care of me, and you were talking to me, and I could hear you all the way through. And I knew you weren't from Arkansas, but that helped. But that was, I thought, like, really cool. Like, talk to your patients.
Yeah, no,
But
that
who
is
would have
really
thought?
cool. That is a really
Yeah,
cool experience.
yeah. That one, I am like, I want to say thank you, higher being, God, Allah, like, thank you for letting me have that and him have that, because he's like, I always want to thank you. Because you were great, because you were really attentive, and you talked to me, and I just couldn't answer. But I mean, that was like, wow, you know.
Yeah.
And of all things he heard me, I think it was fussing at my kid.
Yeah. I think it's easy for us to forget
Yeah.
sometimes to forget the patient when we have 5, 6, 7 other patients that we're trying to,
Yes.
manage and
Yeah.
take care of. And I think that
Yes.
that is really cool that you got to do that. And it's really cool that you got to see the end results of
Yes.
that.
Because one thing that I would do, and this is where I think I would, some of the, and rightfully so, some I think the nurses would have issues with me. I didn't start as an ER nurse. I also was a floor nurse, and but I get it. We didn't appreciate when ER would bring up, people soiled in feces and urine. I mean, I understand that can happen in transport, but also, like, come on, we can do better. And I made sure he was clean before he went up. And I remember a nurse fussing at me like, we don't have time to do that. We're the ER. And I go, but that could have been your mom or your brother. Like,
Exactly.
he's been marinating in that since he got here. It was, yeah, did it take 5 extra minutes? Yeah, but come on, you know?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly. I think when we fly patients, we try to make sure that they're clean before we transport them. And it's just
Yeah.
the little things, right? Like just the little things that we can do for our patients to make them have a more enjoyable, maybe not enjoyable, but an easier
Sure.
transition into wherever they're going, whether it's going upstairs or
Sure.
they're going across the state.
Because we're busy, but we're not that busy, especially if half of you all can go out on cigarette breaks.
Exactly. 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 All right, Tara, I'm going to give you the opportunity to kind of throw out anything else that you want to throw out. If you had anything in mind that you wanted to talk about during this episode, this show's yours.
Well, I want to tell you probably the title. And when I say the title, probably my best story. So when I worked with Mobile Crisis Unit, I was a counselor. And so we would be, and usually we were not first responders. We were, called in after, the scene was safe, supposedly,
Supposedly.
and this was this was in Atlanta, and it was a naked man, and he was erratic, he was on drugs. We weren't really too sure what was going on, and he refused to speak to anyone. I don't know why. He was just standing there naked. He was also covered in blood. Like, it was, I didn't know what was going on, and I wasn't given any information. They're like, you go talk to him, he won't talk to any of us. And I don't want to get too close to him, because I mean, he's naked, and I don't know what's going on. And
Yeah.
he was, his behavior is erratic. I didn't know. And it was like, it was almost like in a movie. So everyone's kind of surrounding us, and he's like, come closer. And I'm like, I can hear you fine. He goes, nope, come closer. And I'm like, oh, she goes, I have a secret. I have to tell you. And I'm like, oh, sweet Mary Jesus. Like, is he going to tell me like he murdered his family? Like, what is he going to tell me? He goes, I have demons in my gonads. I mean, where do I go with that? Like,
Yeah.
one part of me wanted to be a wise ass and be like, well, don't all men? But then I thought, that's kind of sexist of me, and that might not go over well. But like, I mean, what do I do with that? Well, how does that make you feel? Like, what do I say? Well, how about we start with getting you a blanket and keeping the demons covered up? But yeah.
Yeah, no, that'll be a great title.
Yes, I have demons in my gonads. I mean, I really didn't know what he was going to drop on me, Sam. Did he murder somebody? Because that's what I was thinking he was going to tell me. And nope, it was just demons in his gonads. Like, I mean, that's got medicine for that.
Yeah. Don't worry, I've got meds for you.
Yeah.
We'll cure those gonads right up.
Yeah. At the time I wasn't a nurse. I wasn't a nurse, but that was probably one of my favorite jobs. What my favorite job is where I'm at now. But that was definitely my second favorite job. I mean, I learned a lot. It was also a rough job because, you saw just really ugly things, and you were in people's homes in an intimate way, and seeing things that, like, I'm sure they didn't want us to see, like what some of the stuff D.D told you. I mean, go in and be like, oh, this is some type, okay, they got a little thing going on here, okay.
Yeah.
Or walking in with families where there was incest, just like, it just went on and on and on. It wasn't just drugs and alcohol. I mean, we're in mobile crisis, so it was all psychiatry. It was designed in a way to divert people with severe mental illness from going to jail. So I would be with a specially trained police officer. And it was a really cool job, but in a way, I that's almost like kind of like, oh, I wonder, if I go to EMT basic, maybe I could do something like that. But almost in a way, I've been doing what I've been doing for so long too, and I think I'm good at what I do. And also, I'm not, at that time I was 25, I'm 53 now, I don't move as fast.
Yeah.
And, I can think fast, but then what happens is your brain goes offline, and I'll be like, what's the word? Like, Sam, I had to do my little check off on the, trauma assessment as an EMT basic. And I'm like, got this, got this from primary, survey, got this. And then it was like, I could not for the life of me remember, do I bandage first, or do I dress, or do I bandage? And I couldn't remember. Like it was almost like your brain goes offline. I'm like, for the sucking chest wound, is it an occlusive dressing or bandage? Don't we dress a wound? But I couldn't, and I'm like saying this out loud, and they're like, he's probably like, sure, you're a nurse, sure, you had ER experience, sure. I would have thought that.
I think it's easy to sit back too, and being in a position where I'm teaching a little more too now, people say some really funny things, mm-hmm. and you're like,
yeah,
that wasn't on the checklist. Why did you do that?
Yeah. Like, I had to put a pelvic same one. So as I said, I got through the scene size up. I'm on primary, I did the primary survey or the primary assessment. I'm on secondary assessment, and I'm doing my DCAP BTLS, and I'm rocking and rolling, and I'm like feeling the pelvic girdle. And then I'm stuck, and then I'm like, I'm gonna put, and I said, is it, what's going on? Oh, you feel crepitus? Okay, I'm gonna put a pelvic girdle on. And he's like, are you sure you're not a pelvic girdle?
Yeah, are you sure about that? That's all right.
Yeah, sure.
Are you enjoying the EMT basic program?
strangely enough, I love it because it's medical, and it's like I don't ever think about this stuff. And I think it's opened my eyes too, because even though I don't see a lot of medical emergencies or even psychiatric emergencies, but also when I see a student that has altered mental status, and I don't really see that much, but I sometimes will see that, or just somebody that complains of chest pain, I'm always like, it's anxiety. I'm starting to realize, and I also now know if I'm going to work as an EMT, I can't go, oh, they're probably having a panic attack, because that's usually what I think. But no, it could be a lot of other things.
It could be any number of things. Yep. I'm glad to hear
I
that
take it more seriously.
Yeah, I'm glad to hearing that they're pushing more differential diagnoses with the EMTs. That's good.
Yes. They
That's
definitely
really
are. So even if, like, let's just say tomorrow I do my ride along, but let's just say, I'm done. This is just too much trying to manage both. No, I'm going to finish. I am going to finish, and I want to sit for the National Registry. But let's just say, I don't pass or what have you, though I'm doing well in the class, but you never know, I might choke. But I've learned a lot. Like, I think I could be useful if, I'm in an emergency, or I won't make it worse, because I also know, and I've always appreciated as a nurse and a nurse practitioner, and now training as an EMT basic, you sometimes can know just enough to be dangerous. And sometimes it's good to move, but sometimes if you don't know, it may be best to do nothing but just throw a blanket on them.
Yeah. No, definitely. And this is something that I teach kind of often too, is that it is not your emergency.
I like that.
It is not your emergency. Okay. And you can't do anybody any help if you're freaking out. It's not your emergency. Take your time.
I like that. I like that, because I am kind of, I'm thinking, I thought, oh, maybe I'll freak out. But I really, when I worked in the ER, mobile crisis, and I don't freak out. What I'll do instead, every now and then, I just might shut down. But it probably feels like an eternity to me. But then, I boot up again. I just kind of, and it's funny because I think people will think, well, you're really high energy. You seem like you'd freak out. I go, no, I shut down. But I don't curl up in a ball and,
there's nothing
cry in a
wrong
fetal
with that.
position.
Yeah. Like, get it together, figure it out. Use your resources. Yep. Always use your resources. That's my advice to you.
But thank you, because any advice,
Yes. And you can always message. You have my phone number. You have my...
Okay, thank you.
We have 3 different kinds of messenger going on right now. So you can always message if you need anything, and I'll try and help out.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Tara, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute blast. I enjoyed talking to you. You offered a really unique perspective, which was really cool.
Sam, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And as I said, I appreciate just so much what you're doing for first responders and just anyone that works in any kind of trauma setting, because it's something that I've seen for a while, just, peripherally. It's never really been addressed until recently. And I just love hearing everyone on your podcast, and thank you for having me on.
Oh yeah, no, it's been an absolute blast. Thank you so much, Tara. I hope you have a good day.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you for listening. Before we wrap up, we have a few important announcements to share with you. Firstly, we're excited to announce the launch of our brand new 911 Nonsense Facebook group page. It's a community where everyone can go to connect, share ideas, discuss topics from the show, and get all of the most recent updates about the podcast. We'd love to have you join us and be part of the conversation. Next, we want to ask you to rate and review our podcast on your preferred platform. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach a wider audience. By rating and reviewing the show, you'll be supporting us in a big way and helping others discover 911 Nonsense. If you enjoy what we do and would like to support the podcast even further, we have a few options available. You can visit samspursuit.com to find the links to our 911 Nonsense merch page and our recently released Noon gear page. Every contribution, no matter the size, goes a long way in helping us continue to better the podcast. We know that not everyone is comfortable being on the podcast, but we still want to hear your stories and experiences. If you have a compelling story and would like to share it to be read by me in a future episode, please reach out to us via email at 911nonsense@gmail.com or through our website's contact section. If you choose to be anonymous, we'll make sure to respect your privacy while sharing your story in a way that resonates with our audience. Thank you again for tuning in. We truly appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more engaging content in the future. See you next week.